The world became a violent, blinding blur of blue sky and jagged rock. The sound was a ringing echo, a long scream that belonged to 4 people, but not to me. All I felt was the cruel, crushing certainty of gravity winning a battle I never even knew I was fighting. Just 3 days ago, I was Eleanor Black, a retired teacher, a woman of faith, and a beloved mother in Atlanta, Georgia. Now, I was nothing but a broken heap of bone and fear, waiting for the final blow at the base of a 90-foot cliff. It was not a stranger who put me here. It was my own son, Marcus, and his wife, Tiffany. The metallic taste of blood filled my mouth. A fire raged in my left hip, so intense I could not draw a full breath. I tried to cry out, but only a wet, shallow gasp escaped my lips. Then, through the ringing silence, I heard a desperate sound. It was my husband, Clarence, his voice a barely audible, ragged whisper in my ear. "Eleanor, do not move. You must play dead." Hello, everyone. Before we continue, tell us where you are watching from. It keeps our stories alive. I lay still, a stone among stones, trying to make my shallow breathing vanish completely. That one sentence, "play dead," shattered the final illusion of my life. It told me the perfect life Clarence and I built over 4 decades was a stage set for the most terrible crime. It meant my husband, the most trusting man I had ever known, already understood the depth of our son's malice. For 40 years, Clarence and I woke up every morning to the smell of fresh coffee and the warm Georgia sun slanting through the porch window. Our little suburban home was our sanctuary, built on the sweat of an honest man and the love of a devoted woman. I spent my days teaching little ones at the local elementary school, sharing lessons of faith and dignity. Clarence was the master of his carpentry shop, his rough, honest hands capable of turning a simple plank of oak into a priceless piece of art. We had 2 sons, Michael, our firstborn, a spirit of pure light and laughter. 5 years later came Marcus, quiet and reserved, a boy who held his feelings close. As a mother, you swear you never choose favorites, but Michael's open heart made him the easy joy of the house. Marcus required more work, more gentle coaxing. Sunday was our day, the day for God and family. After the service at the Ebenezer Baptist Church, the whole family would gather around the solid oak table Clarence built himself. Michael would fill the air with his grand plans to study engineering and build a life of service. Marcus would stay silent, just picking at the food on his plate, his eyes often downcast. Clarence and I often talked about our dreams on evening walks along the small-town trail. We pictured watching our grandchildren grow up on that very lawn and growing old together in our sanctuary of a home. We never imagined those gentle walks were unknowingly training me for the terrifying fall that almost ended my life. Our happiness felt solid, built on the kind of trust only a shared life of faith and hard work can forge. We were an unbreakable unit, a team forged by 40 years of marriage, or so I believed. Even after all this time, Clarence still brought me wild magnolia blossoms he picked on his way to the shop. He would help me grade my students' tests, and I would hold the heavy pieces of wood steady for him in the workshop. The love was real, a deep-rooted comfort like the massive oak tree in our backyard. But even the strongest roots can hide rot. When Michael turned 20, a shadow fell over our peaceful house. I began to hear hushed, tense arguments between the 2 brothers in the hallway, whispers that stopped the moment I appeared. Clarence insisted it was just brotherly stuff, a passing phase of young men finding their way. I clung to his words because I desperately needed to believe my family was still intact, still perfect. Then came that cold October night, 25 years ago. Michael did not come home for dinner. We waited past midnight, the clock in the living room ticking like a death sentence. Marcus was supposedly in his room studying, but I noticed a strange, hard look in his eyes whenever I asked about his brother. At dawn, the police found Michael's body at the bottom of the river gorge, far from any path he normally took. They called it a tragic accident. He must have stumbled in the dark. I accepted the official story because the truth, the horrible secret that Clarence kept for 2 decades, was too monstrous for a loving mother to imagine. Michael's funeral was the darkest day I ever lived through. I wept until the well of my tears ran completely dry. Marcus was unnervingly calm, a strange silence hanging over him as he stood beside his brother's mahogany coffin. That lack of visible grief, which I excused as shock back then, now sends a deep chill down my spine. After Michael's death, Marcus changed completely. He became intensely attentive, almost overly loving, as if he were trying to fill the vast void Michael had left. He helped Clarence in the workshop and constantly brought me small tokens when he saw I was sad. I believed it was his way of dealing with profound loss. In my innocence, I thought he was trying to be the son we had lost. How naive I was. All that time, he was simply constructing a perfect mask, a new face to hide the cold, calculating stranger that lived inside him. The years blurred, and the wound never vanished, but we learned to breathe around the pain. Marcus married Tiffany, a sweet, church-going girl from the next town, and they seemed to build a happy life. They gave us 2 beautiful grandchildren, and I finally felt like God was giving us a second chance at a perfect family. Tiffany called me Mom and was always ready to help with the dishes or the garden. Marcus had learned Clarence's carpentry talent and opened his own business. Everything seemed whole again, but now, lying here in this agonizing pain, with the metallic scent of my own blood in the air, I finally understand. That peace, that happiness, was nothing but a perfectly engineered lie, carefully built over a quarter-century of silence. The memory of Tiffany's gentle touch on my hand now felt like the slick coldness of a viper. Even as I lay broken at the bottom of the gorge, my mind clung to the scene in the lawyer's office 6 months prior. That afternoon, the perfect mask Marcus had worn for 25 years had finally slipped, revealing the raw hunger beneath. We sat across from Albert Jones, an older man with kind eyes who had been our family attorney for decades. He patiently laid out all the options for our estate: setting up a trust, dividing the assets equally, or a traditional will. Our savings, the land I inherited from my own parents, and the value of our Atlanta home represented our entire life's work. We wanted it to be a blessing, a solid foundation for our grandchildren. Marcus interrupted before Clarence or I could speak, his voice smoothly insistent. He argued that he and Tiffany should be named the sole heirs. They would then, he promised, handle the equitable distribution to our grandchildren later on. I watched his hand clutch the armrest of his chair, the knuckles white and strained. "Mama, Papa, it is simply more practical," Marcus urged, leaning forward with feigned concern. "When you are older, you will need consistent care. It is much better for us to have immediate access to the resources so we can take care of you properly, without legal delays." Tiffany nodded beside him, her smile wide and artificial. Her eyes, however, were not smiling at all. They were calculating the figures in the documents on the desk. Something in his tone felt wrong, a hard edge of command hidden beneath the veneer of love. I remembered how Michael, our oldest son, had always talked about growing up and taking care of us, protecting our home. But Michael was gone, vanished in the gorge so long ago, and Marcus was all we had left. Clarence, always the more trusting of the 2 of us, seemed convinced by the logic of Marcus's argument. I felt a sharp stab of doubt, a deep maternal instinct screaming in my ear that this was a mistake. I swallowed my protest, unable to voice the terrible suspicion that was forming. Was my son looking after our future, or securing his own? I told myself it was just fear, the irrational anxiety of an aging mother facing mortality. But the truth had a bitter, lingering taste. We signed the papers on a breezy Tuesday afternoon. I remember Tiffany was wearing a bright green dress, a color that seemed to mock the darkness of the transaction. She pulled me into a big hug after the final signature was witnessed. "Now we are officially a united family forever," she whispered into my ear. The words should have sounded comforting, but they sent a sudden, icy shiver down my spine. United family sounded less like a loving bond and more like an inescapable trap. Marcus shook Clarence's hand, his grin perfect, yet his eyes remained flat and cold. They contained none of the warmth a son should offer his father. That evening, as I prepared dinner in my beloved kitchen, the feeling of dread was overwhelming. Every corner of the house, every familiar scent, felt tainted by the afternoon's decision. I tried to dismiss the unease, but it refused to leave me alone. I knew, deep down, that I had just made the gravest mistake of my life. The following weeks confirmed my fear. The visits from Marcus and Tiffany changed entirely. They no longer came just for fellowship and family time. Their visits had a cold, strategic purpose. They constantly offered unsolicited advice on how we should improve our finances and our lives. "Mama, Papa, you really should consider selling this huge old house," Tiffany suggested one afternoon, her eyes scanning our vintage furniture like a property assessor. "It is just too much upkeep for two people your age, and the market is so high right now." They spoke of moving us into a small, sterile apartment downtown, a place devoid of the 40 years of memories we had built here. But I loved our house. This was the place where Michael took his first steps. This was where Clarence's workshop breathed life into wood. Every board, every nail, held a story of our marriage, of our faith, and of our children. I could not imagine living anywhere else. When I voiced my refusal, gently but firmly, I saw a terrifying flicker of pure irritation in Marcus's eyes. It was a brief flash, but it was enough to chill me to the bone. "Mama, you are being completely irrational," he snapped, his voice tight with impatience, a tone he had never dared use with me before. "Think of the safety concerns," Tiffany added, quickly regaining her sweet composure. "If you fall down the stairs or have a health crisis, we will not be able to help you in time. Selling now is the smart, responsible thing to do for your future." Clarence, ever the practical man, began to waver, listening to the supposed logic of their arguments. He started talking about the taxes, the repairs, and the rising cost of upkeep. But I saw the shadow of doubt in his eyes, a deeper worry he tried desperately to hide from me. I knew, even then, that Clarence was starting to connect dots that I could not even see yet. He suspected something was terribly wrong. The tension in our house grew thicker than a summer night in Georgia. Night after night, Marcus and Tiffany kept pressing us to sell the home that was the very foundation of my life. I knew their suggestions were not born of love, but of a cold, financial calculation. They needed the house's value to access the full scope of our wealth. "Eleanor, he just cares about us," Clarence argued one night while he was brushing his teeth, his voice a little too defensive. "Maybe we are being stubborn. We are not as young as we used to be, and they just want to protect us." But when he looked at me in the mirror, I saw the undeniable shadow of doubt flicker across his own eyes. I realize now that Clarence already had his suspicions. He was a good man, a trusting man, but he was also smart with money. He was starting to connect the horrifying dots that I, in my blind maternal love, refused to acknowledge. He knew something was terribly wrong with our only surviving son. Things escalated rapidly when Marcus suggested he needed the power of attorney over our finances. "It is just a precaution, Mama," he explained, sitting at my kitchen table, a place where he used to eat my peach cobbler. Tiffany was in the kitchen, making tea, moving with the quiet confidence of someone who already owned the space. "If one of you gets sick or has a health issue," he continued, his voice perfectly modulated, "we can manage your affairs without any messy legal complications. It is a sign of love, not a demand for control." The way he presented the logic was almost hypnotic. His insistence, however, made my anxiety bubble up into genuine fear. I could not sleep that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to Clarence's steady breathing next to me. Why was Marcus so desperate for this level of control? He had a successful carpentry business. He had never once asked us for money. The next day, I picked up the phone and called my sister, Harriet. She had always been the sharper one, the one with a healthy suspicion of people's motives. When I finished explaining Marcus's aggressive requests, she was silent for a long moment on the other end of the line. "Eleanor," she finally said, her voice dropping low, "does it not seem strange that Marcus is this anxious to control your money? He is doing well for himself. Why would he need such deep control over your entire lives?" Her words landed like a hard slap, cutting through my denial. Harriet was right. Marcus had never shown any financial need for our help. That afternoon, when Marcus came by for yet another one of his calculated discussions about our future, I was ready. I sat him down in the living room, near the portrait of Michael, and looked him straight in the eye. "Son, I began, my voice trembling slightly. "Why is it so important for you to have full control over our financial affairs? Your father and I are still sound of mind and body." His reaction was immediate and terrifying. His face hardened instantly, and for a fleeting, sickening second, I saw pure, cold hostility in his gaze. It was a look that reminded me of a predatory animal, not my son. "Mama, it is not about control," he responded in a dangerously tense voice, though his body language screamed the opposite. "It is about love and responsibility to the family." But when he said family responsibility, it sounded less like duty and more like a cruel, suffocating threat. Tiffany, who had been quietly watching from the doorway, glided into the room. Her sweet voice, always her best weapon, cut through the tension. "Eleanor, we just want what is best for you," she insisted, her words like poisoned honey. "It is painful to see you worrying about things we can easily handle." That night, after they finally left, Clarence and I had the most serious argument of our marriage. He thought I was allowing paranoia to overwhelm me, seeing monsters where there were only good intentions. I insisted that our son's behavior had changed too much, too fast. "Clarence," I pleaded, wiping a dish in my hand, "do you remember Marcus before Michael died? He was different. There was a distance about him, something that always scared me a little." My husband suddenly stopped washing the plate in his hand and looked at me. In his eyes, I saw not denial, but a terrible recognition. "Eleanor," he said in a voice I barely recognized, broken and hollow, "there are things about Michael's death that I never told you." My heart instantly hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm of pure terror. "What about Michael's death?" I asked, my voice a dry, trembling whisper. The truth I had avoided for 25 years was about to claw its way out of the darkness. Clarence sat down heavily in one of the kitchen chairs. This was the same chair where Michael used to do his homework, the same spot where Marcus always sat in silence. My heart felt like a caged bird, frantic and desperate to escape. Clarence ran his hands over his face, as if trying to physically wipe away 25 years of tormenting memories. "The night Michael died," he began, his voice broken and hollow. "Marcus was not in his room studying like he told us. I saw him slip out of the house around 8 o'clock. I followed him, Eleanor, because something about his attitude worried me. He had been so strange those last few weeks, aggressive, resentful, and bitter." My husband paused, staring down at his rough carpenter hands, hands that had carried the weight of a horrific secret for so long. "I saw them arguing by the river gorge," he finally whispered. "I heard them screaming terrible things at each other. My world began to spin out of control." "What were they arguing about?" I barely managed to whisper the question, even though a terrible part of me already knew the answer. Clarence looked up, and I saw tears in his eyes. Tears that had remained dry, even at Michael's funeral. "It was about the inheritance," he confessed, the pain twisting his face. "Eleanor," Marcus was furious. Because Michael was the oldest, he felt that according to our family's tradition, he would inherit most of our assets. But there was something more. Something about money that Michael had found out. "What money?" I asked, feeling the solid ground beneath my feet turn into quicksand. Clarence took a long, shaky breath before he continued. 3 days before he died, Michael came to me in the workshop. He had discovered that Marcus was stealing from our family savings account. Small amounts at first, but then bigger sums. Michael had proof. He had been checking the statements discreetly for months. My mind refused to process the revelation. My youngest son, the one who had played the role of the loving, attentive survivor, the son who brought me flowers and helped his father, had been a thief. He had been robbing us even before his brother was killed. "Why did you never tell me this, Clarence?" I accused him, the sense of betrayal doubling inside me. "Because when I got to the gorge that night," he replied in a choked voice, "it was already too late. I saw Marcus standing next to Michael's body." Our youngest son was trembling, crying, repeating, "It was an accident. It was an accident." He looked at me with those desperate eyes and begged me for help. He said, "Papa, Michael tripped when he was trying to hit me. I just defended myself, and he lost his balance." He looked so broken, Eleanor. Tears streamed down my face uncontrollably, mixing with the sweat of my terror. But you believed him, I murmured, my voice empty of life. Clarence nodded slowly, the guilt of 2 decades etched into his expression. He was my son. My youngest son was begging for my help. And Michael was already gone. I thought it was truly an accident. I thought Marcus had learned his lesson, that he would turn into a better man after this tragedy. And the stolen money? I demanded, needing to understand every horrific detail of this nightmare. Marcus promised he would pay it all back, little by little. He swore he had taken the money to invest in a business that had failed. He swore he would never, ever do something like that again. And I believed him, Eleanor. God forgive me, but I believed him because I had to believe my son was not a killer. I stumbled to my feet, holding onto the kitchen counter for support. Everything I believed about my life, my family, and my surviving son was a meticulously crafted, terrible lie. Did he ever pay the money back? I asked, though the devastating look in Clarence's eyes already told me the answer. Never, he replied. In fact, he kept stealing small amounts, and I pretended not to notice, because confronting him would mean admitting I covered up a murder. I became his accomplice, Eleanor. Every day I stayed silent. Every time I saw the bank accounts dwindle, I became more complicit in his crime. The chilling reality suddenly snapped into sharp focus. That is why he is so interested in controlling our finances now, I whispered. It is not about caring for us. It is because he wants to finish what he started 25 years ago. Clarence nodded gravely. And there is something else, Eleanor. Something I discovered just a few weeks ago. What else could there possibly be? I asked, convinced my heart could not withstand another revelation. Clarence walked to his desk and pulled out a stack of papers hidden under a pile of carpentry plans. I have been quietly investigating Marcus's business, he said. His carpentry shop is not doing well. He is on the verge of bankruptcy. He owes over $100,000 to several banks and suppliers. The papers trembled in my hand as I scanned the numbers. Marcus was not the successful man he pretended to be. He was a desperate failure, living on lies and stolen money. Our money was his only lifeline. Does Tiffany know any of this? I asked, a sick feeling rising in my throat. I pictured her sweet, helpful smile, the way she had hugged me only weeks before. Was that embrace a final goodbye, or a calculated measurement of my demise? I am sure she does, Clarence replied, his voice heavy with resignation. I have watched her closely when they talk about our money. She asks specific questions about our savings, the value of the house, the life insurance policies. Those are not innocent questions, Eleanor. They are questions from someone calculating exactly how much our death is worth. That sentence, our death, chilled me to the bone. Until that terrifying moment, I truly believed Marcus only intended to rob us, to cheat us out of our savings. Now, I face the possibility of physical harm. If he had killed his own brother 25 years ago for money, what would stop him from killing his own parents for the same reason? The coldness of the crime was simply unbearable. Clarence, I pleaded, grabbing his hands tightly. We have to go to the police. We have to tell them the truth about Michael, and about what is happening now. We must move immediately. My husband shook his head, a look of utter hopelessness in his eyes. With what evidence, Eleanor? I am an accomplice to covering up a murder. If I talk now, I go to jail too. And besides, who will believe an old man of 65 who has been keeping this secret for 25 years? He was right. We were trapped in a legal and moral nightmare of our son's making. Do we just wait for him to kill us like he killed Michael? I whispered, the words tasting like ash. We are going to be careful, Clarence said, trying to sound determined, though his fear was palpable. We are going to find a way to protect ourselves, to gather proof. His words were cut short by the sudden, cheerful ringing of the phone. It was Marcus. His voice, perfectly sweet and solicitous, floated through the phone receiver. Hi, Mama, he chirped, sounding completely innocent. Tiffany and I were thinking, we believe it would be beautiful to celebrate your 40th wedding anniversary with something truly special. How about we take you two to those beautiful mountains next weekend? We could go on a family hike, take pictures, and just have a perfect day together. My blood instantly turned to ice. I looked at Clarence, who had heard every word. The same look of sheer, paralyzing terror was etched on his face. The invitation was a death warrant disguised as a loving gesture. "That is a very sweet idea, son," I managed to reply, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to control it. "But let us think about it, and we will get back to you tomorrow." After hanging up, Clarence and I stared at each other in the heavy silence of our living room. We knew exactly what this meant. "The mountains," I murmured, the word echoing with dread. "He is going to take us there to kill us, and make it look exactly like an accident." Clarence nodded grimly. "Just like with Michael at the gorge. He is planning to finish it for good." That entire night, we did not sleep a minute. We held each other tightly in our bed, whispering frantically, desperately trying to plan our survival against our own child. We were not just fighting for our lives, we were fighting for the truth. The next few days were a blur of sheer terror and forced performance. Clarence and I had to put on a show for Marcus and Tiffany, acting as if nothing was wrong. We smiled when they talked excitedly about the mountain trip. We nodded when they spoke of spending quality family time together. Every fiber of my being screamed with fear, but I maintained the facade. I was looking into the eyes of Michael's murderers, and now they were planning the same fate for us. Tiffany arrived on Wednesday afternoon, looking radiant, with a big shopping bag in her hand. She was like a bride preparing for a wedding, only this was a wedding with death. "Eleanor, dear," she said, pulling me into a hug that felt like the embrace of a python. "I bought all the supplies for our mountain adventure." She pulled out cookies, bottles of water, and some fresh fruit, showing me the contents of the bag with the enthusiasm of an excited child. All I could think about was how each of those items could be used to stage a perfect accident, to cover up a heinous crime. She was the perfect stage manager for our murder. "I also brought my new camera," she added, holding up an expensive digital model. "I want to capture every moment of this special day. These are going to be photos we will treasure forever." The sheer, chilling irony of her words made my stomach churn. The only photos she truly wanted would be of our broken bodies at the bottom of a ravine. Marcus appeared right behind her, carrying a brand new hiking backpack that looked expensive and professional. "Papa," he said to Clarence with utterly false enthusiasm, "I got all the necessary equipment for a safe hike: ropes, harnesses, lanterns, a first aid kit." Every word that left his mouth felt like a calculated, cruel mockery. Safety equipment to plan our assassination. The perversity of the situation made me dizzy with silent rage and fear. "Is this not a bit dangerous for people our age?" I asked, trying to sound casual, hoping to find any small excuse to cancel the trip. Tiffany stroked my cheek with that false tenderness that now felt sickening. "That is why we picked a very easy and safe trail," she assured me. "It is a hike even children can handle. Plus, Marcus and I will be there to take care of you the entire time. To take care of us until the exact moment they decided to push us off the edge." That night, after they finally left, Clarence and I sat trembling in our living room. We were holding back a terrifying storm of fear that had been building for hours. "We cannot go," I insisted, grabbing his hands so tightly my nails dug into his skin. "We will just tell them we are sick. We will make up an excuse." "If we do not go," Clarence replied in a grave voice, his eyes dark with the realization, "they will simply find another way to kill us. Perhaps something that looks even more accidental, like a house fire or a robbery gone wrong. At least in the mountains, we know exactly what they are going to try." His terrible logic was undeniable. "So, what do you suggest?" I asked, desperate for a solution. Clarence remained thoughtful for a long moment before answering, the gravity of his plan settling over him. "We are going to go," he said, his voice quiet but determined. "But we are going to be ready." He then revealed his dangerous plan. "I am going to hide my cell phone and set it to record everything that happens. Every word, every movement. If we manage to survive, we will have the proof we need. And if we do not," his voice cracked with pain, "at least someone will eventually know the truth." That phone, concealed in recording, was our only weapon. Friday night felt like the eve of our own execution. Clarence and I could barely touch our dinner, knowing it might be the last meal we shared in this house, in this kitchen, where we had built so many happy memories. The clock on the wall seemed to tick louder, counting down the minutes to our calculated end. Clarence spent hours reviewing his will one last time. He wanted to make absolutely certain that if we died, Marcus would not immediately inherit everything without any record of our profound suspicions. He was a man ensuring his final wishes, even in the shadow of betrayal. "I wrote a letter," he confessed, pulling a sealed envelope from a hiding place inside his desk drawer. "It was addressed to my sister, Harriet. In it, I explain everything we know about Michael's death and what we believe Marcus plans to do to us. He had concealed it deep within the files where we kept our most important documents. If we do not return from this trip, Eleanor," he said, his voice raw with finality, "at least she will know exactly where to look for the truth." This letter was our final insurance policy, a silent living will that spoke of murder and betrayal. That night, we went to bed and held each other tight, whispering words of love that felt like a goodbye. "If something happens to me," Clarence said, his breath warm against my neck, "I want you to know that these 40 years with you have been the best of my life. Despite the mistakes and the secrets, I love you more than my own life." I cried in silence, memorizing the rhythm of his breathing, the comforting warmth of his body. Saturday morning dawned with a clear, beautiful sky, a brightness that seemed to mock our terrifying situation. Marcus arrived early, whistling a cheerfully chilling tune that sent shivers down my spine. "Morning, lovebirds," he called out from the front door. "Ready for your big adventure?" Tiffany followed him, radiant and smiling, looking like a woman prepared for a triumphant day, not a horrific crime. During breakfast, which neither of us could force ourselves to eat, Marcus spread a map of the hiking trails on the oak table. "It is a beautiful trail," he explained, pointing with a perfectly steady finger. "It leads to a lookout where you can see the whole valley. The views are spectacular." His eyes shone with a demonic enthusiasm. Of course, the views would be spectacular. They would be the very last thing we ever saw. "The path has some steep parts," Tiffany added, casually stirring her coffee, "but nothing experienced hikers like you two cannot handle." Her comment about our hiking abilities was another cruel joke, confirming they had chosen this difficult route to physically exhaust us, making us easy targets. As we loaded the car, I watched Marcus meticulously check his hiking backpack. I caught a glimpse of what looked like heavy rope, a small shovel, and a large, expensive flare gun. "What is the gun for?" I asked, forcing curiosity into my voice. "For safety, Mama," he replied smoothly, without missing a beat. "If we get lost or something goes wrong, we can send a distress signal." I knew the truth. They would send a distress signal after pushing us off a cliff, ensuring our bodies would be found and the tragic accident would be confirmed. Every detail was calculated, every action planned to conceal murder. The car ride to the mountain lasted 2 hours that stretched into an eternity. Tiffany played cheerful, upbeat music, singing along as if we were truly going on a fun, carefree family outing. Marcus drove carefully, obeying all the traffic laws. He did not want a spontaneous accident to ruin his perfect, premeditated plan. During the trip, Clarence discreetly took my hand and activated the recording on his phone. The tiny red light was now on. Everything that happened from this moment on would be captured. If we survived, we had our proof. If we did not, at least the truth would not die with us. We finally arrived at the trailhead. The beautiful scenery, tall trees, and the sound of a nearby river, now serving as the horrifying backdrop for our planned execution. The trailhead was beautiful, but to me, it felt like the staging area for my own death. Marcus and Tiffany took their backpacks out of the car, laughing and exchanging small jokes as if this were the happiest day of their lives. "Ready for the adventure, Papa?" Marcus asked Clarence, his smile wide and unsettling. For the first time in 25 years, I saw the same cold, hard glint in his eyes that he must have worn the night he murdered his brother, Michael. The initial part of the trail was easy, winding gently through tall trees and past moss-covered rocks. Tiffany walked ahead, her camera constantly clicking, taking pictures and commenting loudly on the stunning beauty of the landscape. "Look at those wild yellow blossoms," she exclaimed, performing the role of the devoted daughter-in-law to perfection. Marcus walked right behind us, supposedly to make sure we did not fall behind. But I could feel his eyes burning into our backs like daggers, watching our every strained step. Every time I turned to look, he offered that practiced, fake grin he had perfected over decades of deceit. "How are you holding up, Mama, Papa?" he would ask with feigned concern. "Do you need to stop and rest?" After about an hour of hiking, the trail abruptly began to climb a steep ridge. My legs were already heavy and burning with fatigue, and Clarence was breathing hard, struggling to keep a steady pace. We were two people in our late 60s, not experienced hikers, and our murderous children knew this perfectly. They had deliberately chosen a route that would physically exhaust us, making us completely vulnerable for the final, fatal push. "We are almost at the lookout," Tiffany announced, shouting down from a bend in the path. According to the small map I had quickly studied at home, we still had at least another hour of strenuous hiking to reach the real summit. Her blatant lie confirmed our worst fears. They had absolutely no intention of reaching the actual, public lookout. The place where they planned to kill us was much closer. During the strenuous climb, I tried desperately to memorize every detail of the path, every distinct tree, every unusually shaped rock, any marker that could serve as evidence if I somehow managed to survive and needed to explain the crime to the police. Clarence was doing the same, and we exchanged brief, silent glances loaded with both terror and grim determination. We knew we were walking toward our deaths, but we also knew this terrifying journey was our only chance to gather undeniable evidence against our children. "Oh, look at that!" Tiffany suddenly shrieked, pointing dramatically to a dramatic rock formation that loomed over the main trail to our right. "That cliff has such an incredible sheer drop view. Why do not we climb up there quickly to take some very special, dramatic photos?" My blood ran cold. There it was, the exact spot they had chosen for our murder. The cliff rose about 90 feet above the main trail, accessible only by a secondary path that looked far more dangerous than the one we had been following. The rocks were loose and slippery. There were very few trees or handholds to grab onto in case of a stumble. From the top, I could see the terrifying precipice that fell into a deep, jagged gorge. "I do not know if that is a good idea," I said, struggling to keep my voice casual. "That side trail looks dangerous for people our age, Tiffany." But Marcus had already started walking toward the turnoff, his backpack full of his elaborate safety equipment. "Come on, Mama," he coaxed, using the soft, manipulative voice he had perfected since childhood. "It will only take a few minutes." Tiffany is right. The photos from up there are going to be spectacular. The way he uttered the word spectacular was chilling. It meant spectacular evidence of our accident for the investigators. Clarence squeezed my hand, a subtle, sharp pressure that reminded me the recording was on. The tape was rolling. We had to go all the way. We had to ascend that final, terrible climb to get the evidence we needed. If we refused now, they would simply find another opportunity, another place, another excuse to kill us. We followed Marcus onto the narrow, dangerous path, walking straight into the waiting jaws of the trap. The climb to the cliff was grueling. The loose, sharp rocks kept sliding under our feet, and I nearly fell more than once. But the terror of the situation lent me a strange, desperate strength. The most terrifying realization was how utterly perfect this spot was for a murder. If someone were to accidentally trip and fall from this height, there would be no possible way to survive. Crucially, there were absolutely no witnesses. "Almost there!" Tiffany shouted down from above, where she had already arrived with the practiced agility of someone who knew the route intimately. Marcus followed her, and then, with utterly false solicitousness, extended his hand to help Clarence and me complete the last few feet of the ascent. His touch on my arm felt like the cold, hard grip of a predator. The lookout was indeed spectacular. From this height, you could see the entire valley, the distant blue line of the mountains, and the river winding like a silver ribbon through the trees of Atlanta. Under any other circumstances, it would have been a breathtaking, beautiful moment to share with family. But knowing what I knew, the place felt like the perfect, horrifying setting for a nightmare. "Come right over here for the photos," Tiffany called out, strategically positioning herself near the very edge of the precipice. "I want the whole valley in the background, Eleanor." Clarence and I moved slowly, each step bringing us closer to our terrifying destination. I watched Marcus position himself behind us, his movements calculated, measuring the angles and the distance to the edge. "Perfect!" Tiffany exclaimed, raising her expensive camera. "Now, hug each other and smile." Clarence and I embraced, possibly for the last time, while she clicked picture after picture. Every flash of the camera felt like a terrible lightning bolt, announcing the inevitable storm. "Take just one more," Marcus suggested, moving closer to us, his voice a dangerous whisper. "But this time, stand back just a little, Mama, so the landscape looks better." One step back meant our heels would be precisely on the terrifying edge of the precipice. Clarence and I exchanged a final, silent, knowing look. The time had come. We had reached the peak of their planned crime. We moved back exactly as we were told, feeling the solid ground vanish beneath the soles of our shoes, with only the vast, hungry emptiness of the abyss behind us. Tiffany raised the camera one last time, but in her eyes, the sweet mask had finally dropped. There was no longer any need to pretend. "Smile," she said, her voice now flat and cruelly triumphant. "This is going to be your last photo." In that same split second, Marcus lunged forward, his arms outstretched, aiming a brutal shove at our backs. His plan was cold and simple. Push us backward, send us tumbling into the void, photograph the aftermath, and then descend to discover our broken bodies. But Clarence had been preparing for this moment, for days. In the very last tenth of a second, he managed to grab hold of Marcus's wrist and wrench him forward with a surprising, desperate burst of strength. "If we are going to die, you are coming with us," he roared, a primal sound of fury I had never heard him utter. For a terrifying, weightless moment, all four of us were teetering on the absolute brink of the cliff, tangled together in a macabre, deadly dance between life and death. Tiffany shrieked and lunged to help Marcus, but the combined weight was too much. I felt the earth give way beneath my feet. Gravity seized us all, and then we fell. The impact was a brutal, bone-shattering violence. I heard the sickening sound of snapping bone, the sound of my own body crashing against the unforgiving rocks. The pain that exploded through me was instantaneous and absolute, beyond anything I had ever imagined. The taste of my own blood was thick and metallic. For a terrible second, I was certain Marcus had won this time. There would be no witnesses left to tell the truth. But then, through the ringing chaos in my ears, I heard Clarence's voice. It was weak, ragged, but clear and commanding. "Eleanor, do not move. Play dead." In that moment of agonizing pain, I realized an impossible miracle. I was still alive. The pain screamed from every fiber of my being. My broken ribs tore at my lungs with every shallow breath. Yet, Clarence's directive was a divine command that anchored me to life. With a desperate willpower I did not know I possessed, I forced myself to be perfectly still, controlling even the slightest quiver of my breathing. I became a lifeless part of the rock and the dirt. A few feet away, I heard the faint, pained moans of Marcus and Tiffany. They too had survived the fall, but their groans of agony suggested they were in worse shape than we were. "Tiffany, are you all right?" I heard my son's broken voice ask. His concern for his wife, immediately after trying to murder his parents, was a chilling testament to his profound lack of morality. "I think my leg is broken," Tiffany moaned weakly. "It hurts so much, Marcus. What about the old people?" Her disrespectful, dismissive way of referring to us, even in her pain, confirmed everything. We were never family to her. We were simply obstacles to their money. I heard movement, the scraping sound of Marcus crawling slowly toward us. My heart hammered wildly, and I prayed he could not hear its frantic rhythm. After a few agonizing minutes, he spoke, his voice filled with sick relief. "They are dead, both of them. Their eyes are open, but they are not breathing." His lie filled me with a sudden, strange surge of hope. If he believed we were dead, we might still have a chance. "Perfect," Tiffany whispered, the satisfaction in her voice chilling me completely. "It worked, just like we planned." She let out a bitter, dry laugh. "Well, except for the part where we fell too. At least we will never have to pretend we love them anymore." For the next few minutes that felt like years, Marcus and Tiffany discussed their situation. Both were badly injured, but still able to move. The new plan was to crawl until they could find a place with reception and call for help. Then, they would spin the story of how they had miraculously survived a tragic hiking accident that had tragically killed their poor, elderly parents. "Remember the story," Marcus instructed Tiffany, his voice tense but steady. "We were taking the last pictures when a rock came loose under Papa's feet. He tripped and pulled Mama with him, trying to grab on. We tried to save them, but we fell too. Our stories must match perfectly." "I know," Tiffany replied, her voice filled with dark resignation. "We have rehearsed this 100 times. We are the traumatized survivors of a family tragedy. Poor us." Her performance was so convincing that had I not been lying there, bleeding and broken, I might have believed her completely. Their voices gradually faded as they painfully crawled away, heading toward what they hoped would be their salvation. When the silence finally returned, Clarence whispered my name again. "Eleanor, are you okay?" I answered him in the same barely audible whisper, confirming I was alive, but dreadfully hurt. "My left leg is broken," he told me, his voice choked with pain, "and I think I have a few fractured ribs." "What about you?" I took a quick mental inventory: a searing pain in my right arm, a throbbing head wound, and a dislocated shoulder. But I was alive. "We are bad, but we are alive," I whispered back. "Did the phone record everything?" "It did," he replied. "But there is no signal down here." That was the most terrifying realization. We were alive, but trapped at the bottom of a gorge, severely injured, with no way to contact the outside world. If no one came for us soon, we would slowly perish from exposure, thirst, or our wounds. "Clarence," I whispered, the word rasping in my throat. "Before it is too late, I need you to tell me everything. Everything that truly happened the night Michael died. I was lying in a pool of my own blood, facing my own death, but I needed the full, unvarnished truth to set Michael's spirit and our own free." My husband sighed deeply, a sound of profound relief mixed with decades of anguish. He had been carrying this horrific weight for 25 years, and now, finally, he was ready to let it go. "That night," he began, his voice trembling, "Michael came to find me in the workshop. He was furious. He had papers in his hands, bank statements. He recounted the evidence. The proof that Marcus had been stealing from our accounts for months, the small amounts building into a significant theft. Michael had been investigating quietly because he noticed the strange discrepancies in our savings. The physical agony of my broken bones mingled with the sickening emotional pain of this revelation, a truth hidden in the shadows for so long. Michael wanted to confront Marcus that same night," Clarence continued, his voice growing stronger with the telling. "I tried to calm him, begged him to wait until the next day, but he was determined. He said he could not sleep knowing his younger brother was robbing us blind." "And you followed him?" I asked, though I already knew the tragic answer. "I followed them because I was terrified of what might happen. I knew Michael's quick temper when he was angry, and I had also noticed the coldness in Marcus recently, a chilling distance that truly frightened me." When he reached the gorge, Clarence found them screaming at each other. Michael held the papers, waving them wildly in Marcus's face. "You are a thief," he was yelling. "You are stealing from our own parents." Marcus, in his desperation, denied everything, claiming Michael was crazy, a liar making things up. My heart raced, visualizing the terrible scene. My two sons facing off in the dark, one accusing the other of the deepest betrayal. "What happened next, Clarence?" He paused for a very long time, the silence stretching tautly between us. Michael told him that if he did not return the money and confess everything to us, he would tell us the truth himself. Clarence's voice broke completely. Marcus went berserk. He screamed that Michael had always been the favorite, that he had everything easy, and that it was finally time for things to change. "And then, Eleanor," he said, tears finally flowing, Marcus pushed Michael. It was not an accident. He pushed him with all his strength, deliberately. I saw Michael struggling to keep his balance, saw his arms flailing desperately for anything to grab onto. But it was too late. tears streamed down my own cheeks, mixing with the dirt and the blood from my wounds. "Why did you never tell me the truth, Clarence?" Because when I got to Marcus, he was sobbing, absolutely hysterical, repeating over and over that it had been an accident, that he had not meant to do it. Clarence's guilt was a palpable weight. He begged me not to tell you, swore he could not bear to lose you too. I knew it was a lie, but he was my son, Eleanor, my only surviving son. How could I turn him over to the police? How could I destroy what little was left of our family? "And the stolen money?" I continued, needing to press the point. "He promised to return it, little by little. He swore it was a terrible, desperate mistake, but he never returned a single penny. In fact, he kept stealing, and I kept quiet. Every day I stayed silent, made me more of an accomplice to his crime." Just then, we heard voices echoing in the distance. Marcus and Tiffany had somehow managed to crawl to an area with signal and find help. Soon, the rescue teams would be here. Our murderous children would step into the role of their lives, the traumatized, grieving survivors of a tragic accident. The most crucial moment of our lives had arrived. The sounds grew closer and louder, accompanied by the distinct whirring of helicopter blades directly above the gorge. Marcus and Tiffany had succeeded in finding help. This was the terrifying climax, the moment of truth. Clarence and I had to decide immediately. Should we drop the act and risk revealing ourselves, or continue to play dead? "Eleanor," Clarence whispered urgently, his voice tight with pain. The phone recorded everything that happened up there. We have Tiffany's confession about the plan. We have Marcus admitting we were obstacles. We have the weapon. He was absolutely right. If they found us alive right now, Marcus and Tiffany would instantly realize their confession was recorded. They would find a way to destroy the evidence before we could ever hand it over to the authorities. This time, it would not be a staged accident. It would be something final and undeniable. We had to wait for the perfect moment, the moment of absolute leverage. "They are down here!" Marcus's voice shouted from the cliff edge above, perfectly broken with feigned despair. "My parents! Please hurry." His performance was flawless. If I did not know the truth, I would have believed he was a son devastated by loss. "Sir, remain calm," an authoritative voice replied, clearly the head of the rescue team. "We are coming down to evaluate you. Can you and your wife move?" I heard the distinct sound of ropes being secured and equipment clinking for the descent. Tiffany had perfected her role as the grieving daughter-in-law. "I cannot believe this happened," she sobbed hysterically. "We were just taking pictures, so happy. A rock came loose and they fell." Every word was a calculated knife twist, because I knew she would repeat those exact words to the police, the media, and the court. The rescuers began their descent. I could hear their voices, the sound of their boots against the rock, and the clinking of their gear growing closer. Clarence subtly squeezed my hand, a silent, powerful reminder that we had to maintain the charade, no matter how excruciating the pain. "They are here!" one of the rescuers yelled upon finding our bodies. "We have 2 people at the bottom of the gorge." He approached us and began his examination. I kept my eyes closed and my breathing so shallow it was almost non-existent. I felt his hands searching for a pulse on my neck, his ear close to my mouth. "This one still has a faint pulse," he announced, referring to Clarence. "The woman? I am not sure. I need the medical team down here immediately." My heart hammered against my ribs. The plan was working. They would believe Clarence was critical but alive, while I was close enough to death to not be an immediate threat. They would prioritize our immediate transport to the hospital. For the next few minutes, which felt like an eternity, the paramedics worked on us. I felt them place an oxygen mask on my face, check my wounds, and gently strap me onto a stretcher. All the while, I had to fight every primal instinct that screamed at me to open my eyes and beg for help. "The man is stable, but critical," I heard one paramedic report over the radio. "The woman is in very serious condition, pulse almost imperceptible. We need immediate air transport to the nearest trauma center." Perfect. They would take us to the hospital, where we would finally have the opportunity to speak with the authorities without Marcus and Tiffany being able to silence us forever. During the ascent, as I was strapped onto the stretcher, I could hear Tiffany's feigned sobs and the words of comfort the rescuers offered to her and Marcus. "You were so brave to survive this," someone assured Tiffany. "It is a miracle that you are relatively okay." If only they knew that the real miracle was that Clarence and I were still alive to tell the whole truth. In the medical helicopter, flying towards the hospital in Atlanta, I could feel Clarence's presence on the stretcher right next to mine. The paramedics were intensely focused on stabilizing him. I gathered from their conversations that his injuries were more critical than mine. For one terrible, flashing moment, I feared he might pass away before we had the chance to reveal the 25-year-old secret. "Ma'am," I heard one of the paramedics say to me, his voice gentle and full of genuine compassion. "If you can hear me, hold on. We will be at the hospital in just a few minutes." His sincere concern was a stark, dramatic contrast to the bitter falsehood I had been living with from my own family. When we arrived at the trauma center, the chaos was immediate and overwhelming. I was rushed directly into an emergency room where doctors and nurses started working on my injuries. I had to keep the act going, pretending to be unconscious, but my mind was frantically searching for a way to communicate with someone I could trust. "Doctor," I heard a sharp nurse say. "Her vital signs are strange. Her pulse is stronger than we would expect for someone in her supposed condition." My heart skipped a beat. Had they discovered me? Was I such a bad actress that my own body was betraying the charade? The doctor murmured, checking the monitors. "It happens sometimes in cases of extreme trauma. The body has mysterious ways of clinging to life. Let us keep a close watch. The next few hours will be absolutely crucial." Tiffany made a sound that was supposed to be a sob of pain, but to me, it sounded distinctly like a sigh of immense relief. "Can we see them?" Marcus asked, his voice strained. "Just for a few minutes. We need to say goodbye, just in case." The doctor agreed. Soon, I heard their footsteps approaching my bedside. This was the most dangerous moment of all. I had to convince my murderous son that I was truly dying. I felt Marcus's presence next to the bed. His hand tentatively touched mine, and it took every ounce of my willpower not to pull my hand away immediately. "Mama," he whispered, his voice dripping with poisonous, false emotion. "If you can hear me, I want you to know that I love you. I am so sorry this happened." His words were poisoned honey, sweet on the surface, but deadly in their intent. Tiffany approached from the other side. "Eleanor, dear," she murmured, "you have been like a mother to me. We will never, ever forget you." Liar, I thought. The single word ringing in my mind. The only reason they would not forget me was because they would have to live with the knowledge that they had ruthlessly murdered me. But then, Marcus leaned closer to my ear and whispered something that froze the blood in my veins. "I hope you have finally learned your lesson, Mama. You never should have asked so many questions about our finances. Some truths are better left buried, just like Michael." At that precise moment, I knew our plan had worked. Marcus had just confessed. Even without the audio recording, there was a quiet nurse in the room who had heard every single word. Marcus's terrible whisper, just like Michael, echoed in my ears like a direct, final confession of his guilt. He had mentioned his dead brother. He had admitted that our questions about money were the true reason for the accident. But I needed more than a whisper. I needed a full, undeniable confession. The nurse who had overheard the comment, a young woman named Inns, had frozen instantly next to the monitoring machine. Through my half-closed eyelids, I saw her eyes widen in a mixture of shock and horror. She had heard a terrible truth, and her expression told me she understood the chilling implications perfectly. "What did you say about Michael?" Tiffany hissed, clearly realizing her husband had made a fatal mistake. Marcus tensed, immediately trying to backtrack. "Nothing, Tiff. I just meant, well, Mama always wondered what really happened that night. I guess it does not matter anymore." But it mattered profoundly. Tiffany, who was sharp, realized the danger. "Marcus, let us go," she said in a tense, low voice. "The doctors need space to work." I felt the sudden, desperate tension between the couple, the mutual understanding that they had said too much in the wrong place. After they left, Nurse Innes cautiously approached my bedside. "Ma'am," she whispered, her voice barely audible, "I know you can hear me. What I just heard is absolutely not normal. If you are in danger from those people who just left, you need to tell me somehow." Her voice carried an urgency that suddenly filled me with profound hope. Very slowly, almost imperceptibly, I moved my right index finger. It was the smallest movement possible, but Innes noticed it instantly. "Oh my God," she breathed, her face pale. "She is conscious. She is pretending to be unconscious." I moved my finger again, this time twice. "Yes, listen," she instructed, leaning closer. "I am going to pretend to check your monitors. If you are in danger because of those people, move your finger 3 times. Without a moment's hesitation, I moved my finger 3 times. Innes gasped. "They did this to you." I moved my finger 3 more times to confirm. The nurse moved away and pretended to adjust my IV, her mind clearly racing as she struggled with the decision of what to do next. Finally, she returned to my side. "I am going to speak to the head doctor immediately," she whispered, "but you must keep pretending until we can protect you. Do you understand?" I moved my finger once. Yes. The next few minutes were agonizing. Innes left the room, and I waited, praying that she would be believed. Finally, I heard footsteps approaching. It was Innes, accompanied by the chief physician and, miraculously, 2 police officers. "Ma'am," the doctor said in a low, authoritative voice, "Nurse Innes has informed us of your situation. If you can hear me, you need to know that you are safe now. The officers are here to protect you." A wave of intense, overwhelming relief washed over me, almost breaking my resolve. "Can you open your eyes, ma'am?" one of the officers asked gently. Slowly, I opened my eyes. The bright hospital lights blinded me for a moment, before I focused on the worried, yet determined faces surrounding me. "Thank God," Innes murmured. "Ma'am, I am Detective Johnson," the officer said, his expression serious. "We understand you may be in a very dangerous situation. Can you tell us what truly happened on that mountain?" My voice came out as a raspy, weak whisper after hours of silence. My son and his wife pushed us. The next few hours were a whirlwind of statements and revelations. I told Detective Johnson everything: Michael's murder, Marcus's ongoing thefts, the intense pressure to change our will, and the premeditated plan to murder us on the mountain. But the most vital piece of evidence was on Clarence's phone. "Your husband recorded evidence?" the detective asked, his eyes gleaming with professional satisfaction. "Yes," I replied. "Everything is on his phone. The confessions, the plans, their conversation after they thought we were dead. Everything." The detective immediately went to Clarence's room. Clarence, who had regained full consciousness, handed over his phone without hesitation. "Here it is, Detective," he said in a weak but firm voice. 25 years of lies, and the truth about what happened today." While police technicians analyzed the recording, Marcus and Tiffany waited in the waiting room, still playing the role of the devastated family members. They had no idea that their carefully constructed world of lies was about to collapse. "The recording is crystal clear," Detective Johnson announced after an hour, returning to my room with a look of grim satisfaction. "We have explicit confessions about Michael's murder, admissions about stealing money, and direct, undeniable evidence of premeditated attempted murder against you 2. It is more than enough to place Marcus and Tiffany under arrest." I finally allowed myself to relax onto my pillow, the weight of 25 years of fear lifting from my soul. The justice for which I had prayed was finally at hand. "Are you going to arrest them here?" I asked, still concerned for Clarence's safety and mine. "We already have officers positioned," the detective confirmed. "As soon as the arrest warrant is signed, we will take them in. Until then, you are both completely under police protection." The irony was sharp. Marcus and Tiffany were downstairs, still playing the role of grieving, traumatized survivors, accepting condolences for our deaths. They had no idea that upstairs, their perfect world was being systematically torn apart. The detective laid a folder of papers on the table. After hearing your story, we investigated your son's finances quickly. Not only is he bankrupt, but he also owes money to some very dangerous, unofficial lenders who do not accept excuses. My blood ran cold. You mean, we were not just an inconvenience to him? You were his only salvation, the detective replied. With your inheritance, he could pay his debts and start fresh. Without you, he would likely be dead or disappeared within weeks. That revelation added a horrifying new layer to the betrayal. Our death was not simply convenient, it was absolutely necessary for his own survival. What about our grandchildren? I asked, a wave of pain hitting me for those innocent children. Social services will take temporary custody of them, the detective said gently. But as soon as you both recover from your injuries, you can certainly apply for formal custody. The idea of raising the children of our murderers was overwhelming, yet it was also the only way to ensure something good came from this darkness. Those children were innocent, and they deserved real love and a solid, honest home. It is time, the detective announced when an officer entered with the signed warrants. We are going to arrest them now. Through my window overlooking the hospital parking lot, I watched police officers position themselves discreetly. The moment I had been waiting for Michael's justice had finally arrived. I heard the firm voice of the arresting officer. Marcus Black and Tiffany Black, you are under arrest for the murder of Michael Black and the attempted murder of Eleanor and Clarence Black. The silence that followed was broken by Tiffany's hysterical shriek. What are you talking about? We are the victims here. They died in an accident. Ma'am, the officer replied calmly, your in-laws are alive and have provided complete evidence of your crimes. That is impossible. Marcus screamed in pure desperation, his voice breaking. We saw them die. They were dead. His involuntary confession, captured by the police recorders, sealed their fate. In minutes, their alliance crumbled, with Tiffany immediately blaming Marcus, and Marcus screaming that Tiffany had suggested the Cliff idea. They were both sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Justice, swift and complete, had been served. 1 year later, Clarence and I finally went home. We are still recovering, both physically and emotionally. The house feels whole again, no longer stained by the presence of a snake hiding in plain sight. Most importantly, we have successfully begun the process of formally adopting our 2 grandchildren. They are beautiful, bright, and loving children who will now grow up knowing what true, unconditional love is, not the toxic manipulation they received from their biological parents. Every night when I tuck them into bed, I tell them about their Uncle Michael, the gentle, honest spirit they never had the chance to meet. Clarence and I look at each other now, and the shadow of the secret that tormented him for 25 years is finally gone. We are broken, but we are strong. We lost a son to the earth, but we gained 2 grandsons, and for the first time in a quarter century, we have found true peace. Our old age is not what we planned, but it is a new beginning, a rebirth built on the hard, solid rock of truth and faith. We survived the fall, and in doing so, we finally found justice. Did my story resonate with you? Which part of this family drama touched your heart the most, and what would you have done in my shoes? I would be honored to read your thoughts and your own experiences in the comments below. If you believe in the power of faith, dignity, and getting justice, please consider sharing this story with someone who may need to hear it. And please subscribe to this channel for more life stories just like this one. Thank yourself so much for listening. I am looking forward to reading your comments.